Okay, welcome everybody to the second edition of the Professionally Evil Lunch and Learn. My name is Nathan Sweaney. I'm one of the senior security consultants at Secure Ideas. And this webcast series is an idea that we had to kind of cut through some of the fluff of the marketing-driven webcasts that are out there. We know that you've got a lot of different webcasts and podcasts and competition for your time. So we just want to do something a little bit more fun and relaxed. Hopefully you'll enjoy it. Hopefully you'll learn something. Worst case, if you're collecting CPEs, you can at least count this for 1 hour credit. So you're good enough there. So here's the idea. Every month, we're going to sit down during the lunch period. We may grab lunch. The jury's still out on how well that worked last year or last month. We at least have drinks, right? Are you guys eating anything? Kate, do you have food?
I actually just finished eating, but I have some that I haven't finished that are going to be leftovers.
All right. What about Eric and Jason? You guys are too professional looking to have food. They got drinks. All right. So anyways, that's the idea. Bring your lunch. We're going to jump on here and just talk about some security topic. It may be a general theme. It may be some current events depending on what's going on. This month we're going to be talking about passwords and all the different things that go into that, password management and all the different subtopics. So we're going to try to mix it up each month, have some different panelists. We're starting out here with some folks from Secure Ideas. We may bring in some outside folks as well at some point. But we're just going to do our best to kind of make it lively and hopefully have a little bit of fun. I also wanted to mention before we get too started, yes, Gillam just held up a beer stein. We would love to have you join us. You can do that a couple of ways. So you can put comments in the chat section on GoToMeeting. I'll be honest, that's hard for me to see when we're talking, so those may get distracted or not caught, but we'll try to include those. The other option, the better option, is to join us on Slack. So if you go to professionallyevil.com, down at the bottom of that homepage, there's a link where you can get an invite to join our Professionally Evil Slack team. And that's just a team for security folks to hang out and talk security. So we'd love to have you join there. You can see... I guess you can't see that on the window, but it's on the recording. The communication and chat going on there as well. We are recording this. The plan is to open it up and upload it to YouTube unless we just mess something up. So there's that. The last thing I wanted to say is some of you guys had problems joining. Last month we set this up as a recurring webinar for like the next 7 months. And then we had problems with that, the way the catalog works for people to be able to see it and continue joining and stuff like that. So what we did is we canceled that one, and then we've created new ones every 7 months. So if you want, you can go ahead and join the ones that are out there available. Actually, we may have only put 3 or 4. I don't remember how many are out there now. But you can join those, or we'll send you email reminders, and you can sign up as we go. Did I miss anything? All right. So let me do some introductions. I'll start with, just because this is the order I have them written out here, Jason Gillam. He's actually, I don't know if the cameras are in the same order for everybody. He's the one waving here. Your name is right under you, ironically, in my view. Jason is one of our principal consultants at Secure Ideas. He also participated in last month's Lunch and Learn. In a previous life, he did enterprise level AppSec before he decided to join the red team. Jason still looks good in a suit and has enough gray in his hair that people actually take him seriously now. Today, Jason will be waving the 8 characters is enough for anyone flag. I should have told you that ahead of time and you could get an actual flag.
I will? Okay.
Kate Vajda in the middle there, enough said. If you're new to security or haven't been to Michigan, she's kind of a big thing. Kate came to SI, you can tell by her age, basically straight out of high school after spending about 10 years at a large power company. She dreams of becoming an auditor someday and spends her spare time trying to accumulate more conference badges than Jason Street. If you're at a conference, a security conference, there's a good chance she's probably there with you. Kate's position today is that compliance requires at least 15 characters, which actually I looked it up. She's got a flag. So I looked it up. NERC SIP actually requires 8 as well, but we'll come back to that. And then last but certainly not least, Eric Kuehn is also, he joined Secure Ideas after sacrificing his youth at one of those soul-crushing enterprises like Jason. You can tell they both have the button-up shirts on the right. Before becoming a consultant, Eric managed the identities of practically most of the world for one of the largest banks in the world. Eric has become our Windows guru and is known for grabbing domain admins while you're still trying to log in. Today, Eric will be playing the role of, I really don't care how long your password is.
That's pretty much true.
All right, so with that, let's just go ahead and jump in. The agenda here, I've got a bunch of general topic ideas around passwords, but if somebody wants to throw something out, please feel free to do it. If somebody wants to dive into something, make a comment in chat or in Slack if you want to take it further. If you really want to verbally make a comment, as long as we can trust you not to be stupid, feel free to post that and we may open up the mics. I'm not sure the rules on that, but we're making it up as we go along. So passwords. The first question, I guess, just to get everyone going, how long is enough? What's the minimum length for a good password? Who wants to start?
Anybody? I guess
I can start. Go ahead, Jason.
I think if you go with, about 1,000 characters, that should be strong enough. No, it really depends. I think that's the answer to that question. It really depends. It depends on what you're protecting with your password. That's a big part of it. Most of us, I mean, if you're talking about a password to get into an account or something like that, then the password length itself is, I think that's changing anyway. I'm sure we're going to get to that in other topics as to, how important is the password, right? Because we started talking about you started talking about like multi-factor authentication and other forms of logging in, fingerprints and stuff like that. And stack that on top of passwords, then that kind of changes the answer as well. But if you're just talking about a pure password, I don't know. I like it as long as possible. I mean, if I'm trying to protect something with a password, it's going to be 20 characters or so. So there goes my 8 characters.
You dropped that flag pretty quick. I usually, if the application allows you to do 20, I'll do 20, but some of them limit, and if it goes to 40, I'll do 40. Whatever the application lets me do is usually what I'm like, I'll set it to that because I'm generating it anyways and keeping it in password safe. So to me, it really doesn't matter what the length is, but I'm going to use as much as I can.
That's fair. What about how many times have you had to like put in a like really, really long password into like your Wii or your Roku or something that, it's like, you got to click up, left. Oh,
that's pretty painful. But I've done it. I've done it many times. And then, eventually you get tired of that. And then you're like, all right, fine. This can be a 4-letter password. I don't care anymore.
And, and we're technical people, but like, think about our family members. They're like, it's just my Windows password. Why should I care? 4 characters is plenty long enough.
I think you have to gamify it for that to work. Make it a really long, make it a competition who can put in the password among your family members. He can do it.
The other problem that I run into too often is you go to put a password in. So you're going to go to set your password on a site. You're thinking, oh, I'm going to use a passphrase here, right? I'm going to go for something really long like I'm supposed to. It's going to be 25 characters or so. And then you find out that they actually don't allow spaces or they don't allow punctuation. And it's really annoying. Or there's a limit. Oh, your password can't be any more than 15 characters, 16 characters long. It's like so annoying when that happens. Like, stop putting limits on what I can use as a password.
Yeah, that's a great point. I don't know if you guys saw it a couple weeks back. I was signing up for something. I bought something from Lowe's online, and it had the option to use, I think it's called Visa Pay or Visa Checkout or something like that. You guys familiar with that? It's basically Visa's, it's a way to use Visa for processing the card instead of giving my card to Lowe's, because what could go wrong there? They're not Home Depot. Home Depot lost my card, so I guess I should give Lowe's a chance too. But Visa Checkout said, like, I put in a big long password that I dumped out of my password manager, and it said, you can't use these characters. Like, you can only use these. So then I got in a big argument on Twitter with them about PCI and best practices and, you know, all that kind of stuff. So, Eric, what do you think? You haven't had a chance to throw in there.
I've been sitting here. I mean, Jason jumped in with passphrases, so he beat me to it. But I mean, I don't know. I find it, you know, what is that strong enough? I agree, as long as I can make it. But I typically don't use the random generated. I'll still come up with something. But I love passphrases, you know, so much better than passwords. Even my parents, right, who have troubles understanding why they need different passwords, they got the concept of passphrases pretty quick. You know, that's easy to remember. I just need a sentence that makes some sort of sense.
Well, I think one of the problems that people have, though, is, and this is, you bring up your parents who are less tech savvy, as are probably most of our parents. But it's this getting over the idea that setting a password, it's not about making your password so that some other person won't be able to just guess it. I mean, that is one of the ways that people could, you know, use your password to get into things. But most of the time, they're not just trying to guess your password based on, you know, your favorite color or the name of your dog or something like that, right? It's usually something, you know, the scenario is usually more complex than that, and we can get into that. I mean, different ways that passwords can be compromised and what that means for setting it. So
yeah, that's a good point. I didn't really think about that too much. You know, I mean, we talk about cracking and stuff, and we can come back to that. But you know, most people, what they have, their impression of how passwords are compromised is based on what they've seen on TV. You know, which is, you know, guessing something simple. Oh, I knew his kid's birth date, right? And you know, where he went to school or something.
Yeah. Or a favorite sports team or something like that, which I'm sure a lot of people use that as a password. That's probably not a good idea either. But yeah, just because a passphrase seems like something that's fairly simple to you, that doesn't necessarily mean, and in fact, in most cases, it isn't easy to crack.
Right. Now, Eric and Jason, you guys both have kids that are a little bit older than mine. I've struggled with, so just to be clear, my oldest is 9. I've got a 6-year-old, a 4-year-old, and a 1-year-old. For the older two, we have devices that we let them use. They're old iPhones that my in-laws kind of hand-me-downs, that we let them use for a few things here and there. It started out as, you know, it's only when we're like waiting in line at the doctor's office or, you know, long car rides or whatever. And of course, like all technology, it seems to be infiltrating life. But one of the struggles we've had is teaching them to use good passwords or passphrases on their devices or good pins, and yet it also needs to be something that mom and dad know. And so we struggle with that, and I don't know the good answer. Has anybody found a better way to handle that? You know, like my first gut is, oh, let's put our house number, you know, 5927 as your pin code. And my oldest was like, well, that's not a good passphrase. Everybody knows that. I'm like, well, but yeah, but I don't want you to have a good one because then I won't know it. Have you guys dealt with that?
We have, but I think it's the other way around. It was something that I came up with, and I said, this is your password for your phone or your whatever it is, your tablet, not the other way around. Now, admitted, we're still using the pins on those, right? Yay, Android and iOS and everything wanting to use pins more than passwords.
By default, yeah.
Yeah, by default. So it's not too bad, right? 4 to 6 characters, just numbers.
Yeah, I think you're underestimating kids because, I mean, I have a really hard time remembering anything more than 3 digits. But
I'm not underestimating them. I'm underestimating myself. I'm worried that I'm going to forget it.
Yes.
But I think that's a good idea. You basically, you come up with the number, whatever it is, and you tell them this is it, and then you put it in your password manager because that's the only way you're going to remember it yourself.
Because you're not typing it in all the time. It's amazing how quick it goes away. It's just like when you set your password before you go on vacation.
Yeah.
Oh, right. You know?
Yeah, we had much tears about a month ago because my kid, the oldest, got his phone taken away for several months, and we were just like, you know what, we don't need this anymore. And when we came back to it, he had changed the passcode, and nobody remembered where it was because nobody logged into it for a while. So, and of course, we didn't have everything backed up, and so he lost a bunch of, you know, silly stuff, nothing important, but to him it was important. So Ben asked in chat about complexity. Let's just jump in there. You know, there's the traditional. Well, Eric, you probably know this best. Explain the Microsoft's traditional complexity rules and the kind of the basis behind that.
Okay, Microsoft complexity is you must have 3 of the 4, right? So you need to have an upper, a lower, a number, or a special character, right? You need to have those in whatever frequency, but you must have 3 of the 4. And it cannot be the same as your ID, right? That's the other portion that I don't know how many people have tried, but you know, Windows 10, et cetera, it won't let you use that as your password.
So what's the argument behind that? Obviously, is the more complex is better, right? Making it more difficult to crack passwords. What do you guys think? Is the complexity rules, are those still good, or should those be thrown out the window?
Well, so I think it always comes back to what we started at the beginning, which is what other things do you have with your password, right? Admitted, having the complexity, if you're forcing people to use 8 to 12 characters, right? Or you're limiting them to the number. You aren't letting them put spaces, right? Or passphrases. Trying to come up with something that has those special characters is kind of hard. You're trying to take something that should be easy and saying, well, now I need to put, you know, an ampersand or something that doesn't make sense, right? It's a pattern that you have to follow for no specific reason. And I think that does cause problems, and that's why we get horrible passwords like hello 5 exclamation point or whatever it might be, right? Something in there just because we just tack something on at the end because we need that special character. And yeah, I think exclamation points are typical, fine. You know, so I really, yeah, I'm not a fan of saying you need to have it when you're limiting passwords. But once again, if you don't have a limited length and you can get the idea to people that, hey, make a sentence, right? Just make a sentence, then it becomes very easy to include those characters.
Including punctuation too, like commas or, you know, anything else. Yeah.
Make a sentence, not text speed. So.
Well, unless you're just commonly, you do that anyway.
Well,
teenagers these days.
Yeah, fair enough. How can you explain that? Good point. I didn't think about it.
I had someone come up to me once say, oh yeah, you could make a sentence and then you could take out all the spaces and you could use the first letter of each word. And I was like, whoa, you just turned this into something insane where it was pretty good where it started. And they're like, and change the letters to numbers. I'm like, this is almost too obvious. Like, don't do that. I didn't know how to tell them that was a terrible idea without offending them, obviously, but I didn't, you know, I was like, just go back to the first sentence you had. I don't know if I helped them.
Now, that approach is slightly better than using a dictionary word, but that still doesn't make it okay, because I've seen that too.
Yeah. Or replacing
Yeah.
ones with exclamation points, you know.
I was talking to Eric before this. A couple of years ago, I'd done some math in a spreadsheet on complexity versus length of passwords and how many permutations you get by adding more length versus more character sets, I guess, or character types. And when I did that, if you look at that information, which I probably at some point should build a white paper around it, but basically up until around 10 to 12 characters, the length is the most important factor for increasing the complexity of the password. After that, you kind of start needing a mix. So if you have a 6 or 8 character password and you add, let's say you started off with just alphanumerics, and then you say, well, what would happen if we added symbols into that as another available character set to use for those? It doesn't make a huge difference at that point in time on how many permutations you get compared to changing it from, let's say, 8 characters to 10 characters as a minimum. The moving from 8 to 10 makes you get more possibilities for words. And we see this as well when because we have a cracking rig, which Nathan built. So, and it's on commodity hardware, and you know, getting through the character hashes of 7 to 8 character passwords goes fairly quickly. I mean, within 24 hours or 48 hours? I forget.
No, I would say it's 16 to get to 8.
16 to get to 8. Okay, so faster. So it goes pretty.
Well, and to be clear, that's to brute force every possible password in 8 characters for an NTLM password. So In reality,
But
you're
that-
going to be about half that on average, right? And then once you add rules and stuff like that, it's going to be even less ultimately.
it goes even less, but it gets significantly slower once you start getting into the longer passwords.
Oh, yeah.
Right, because then it has to try every single permutation it's already gone through, but with one and more character value on there. So it gets huge. So the length, I think, makes the biggest difference for us.
Yeah, I was trying to look. Didn't and I just wrote a blog on this, so I should remember. But the new NIST documentation, didn't they recommend against complexity requirements?
Everybody is, that's kind of the, what am I trying to say here? That is a common statement coming from lots of places, not just NIST, right? Microsoft as well, forcing password changes, forcing complex passwords, all these things are considered bad, but then they talk about all the other controls they have in place. You should be using a second form, right? Multi-factor. You should have, good lockout. You need to have good alerting. You need to have, your profile, whatever it might be, right? Then sure, don't worry about changing your password so often because it's only one portion of the entire authentication.
Yeah, the problem occurs when your password is basically the only control.
Yeah.
That's where you have it becomes so critical that you have no choice but to have a very, very strong password.
Yeah.
Yeah. So, I mean, what I think one of the traditional arguments I've heard against complexity is that users aren't going to make good passwords anyway. No matter how much you train them, if your security is dependent on user education, you're never going to get there. I've heard that too many times. And the argument is that all they're going to do is if you tell them they have to have a symbol, they're going to add an exclamation point on the end. If you tell them they have to have a number, they're going to add a 1 on the end. Or if you tell them they have to change it, they're going to change it to a 2. What do you say to that? Like, what's your response?
I think it's once again because we've been stuck in this idea of passwords are an esoteric combination of numbers and letters that are this long, right? I know I keep saying passphrase or sentence, but I think that's the problem. We've taught everybody this is your password, or your PIN, since ATM days, right? It's supposed to be something short that only you will know. There's only so many combinations when you get there. Thus we get to the cracking and everything else, right? If you stop saying, hey, give me 8, whatever, give me something that is this long, you just say, write a sentence. Unless you come up with an incredibly short sentence, I like cats. Nope, even that's like 12 characters. Huh?
I said you love large cats. Is that
No,
an
that's
adjective?
like a really high number, but still, you know what I mean? It becomes easy, so.
I would say like add keys wherever possible, like public-private keys. If you could do that instead of typing in passwords, that's way better. Or, I guess a password manager, anything like that. Something that automatically changes itself. I don't know. I'm not trying to like sell a product here, but CyberArk was really awesome when I used it. Just having it change passwords for things every single day. And they were like, yeah, I would say they've grown a lot over the years, but yeah, just having something that changes constantly, you don't have to know it. It sorts it out on its own, and you just go to some password vault somewhere.
Yeah, let's talk about password manager. So, I mean, CyberArk's kind of the gold standard, right? If you can afford it, that's the one you want to use. They've been around the longest, but what other ones are out there? Let's talk about like commercial, corporate business products first, if we have anything, and then we'll talk about personal stuff. But what do you guys think? Do you have ones you recommend?
Well, say which one you recommend. That one's a good one. I'm trying to remember. There was also one by RSA, which I can't remember off the top of my head. All right, so I'll take the Microsoft route and I'll say, hey, Microsoft has a solution as well nowadays if you're interested, which changes names multiple times. I want to say it's their PAM solution now. I'd have to look at it again. So, yes. They do. And actually, I highly recommend it because it beats a couple of problems that Microsoft has with authentication, right? The biggest being when you log in, your token is set at that moment. Have a nice day. This actually does some nifty things with shadow groups and stuff in the background where when your time expires, you no longer have the access. So.
And then what do you do?
What do you mean? What do you do?
But if you don't have the access, it expires, then what?
Well, if you still need it, you'll have to re-authenticate into the solution to get it again.
Okay.
So anyways, I'll highlight that one.
Yeah, you're gonna have to find that and provide some links for us, because I'm not seeing anything on Google about it.
I think Mike just did it for us, which was nice of him. The big problem with it though, I'll take the other side. The big problem is they don't give full built solutions. They're expecting you, they give you a framework and they expect you to build it out.
Okay.
Yep.
Yeah, so that's not always the right solution for a lot of businesses.
No, the other big one that everybody is talking about is, Microsoft as well. They're talking about, do a hybrid authentication, right? So, hey, you have your on-prem connected up to Azure, and then you can use Azure's MFA or other security through them to get your additional checks.
Right. Let's come back to that, because I want to talk about that. But before we leave the password manager stuff, what are mistakes that you've seen people make with password managers? Have you seen people do it wrong, or things that they need to watch out for?
Not doing two-factor with their password manager.
That's fair point, right?
Yeah, they come with features, these password managers, and you have to actually use those features to get the benefits from it, right? So, for example, password managers, they usually, when you say generate me a password, you have options, checkboxes and stuff you can do to select your password. And you can have it select a 7-character password for you if you really want to. Don't do that. I mean, you should probably, as close as you can, max out the length. You're not expected to remember it anyway. So put something long and complex in there and maximize whatever. If the site that you're trying to set up the password for accepts special characters, then check the box that says use special characters, that sort of thing. So you got to make use of those. Two-factor, as Kate said, is another one. All of those password managers, they typically rely on you knowing a master password. That's the one you have to remember. It should be a long passphrase, something that's very complex, or long anyway, long and complex, but not so complex that you won't remember it. So,
and also not something that you use somewhere else.
That's right.
Like your Yahoo password.
Don't reuse your master password in any other sites that is protecting. Kind of defeats the purpose, right?
What I remember we set one up, and I'm hesitant to mention the name of it, but we had enough problems with it. I'm okay. The secret server from Thycotic, I think. I'm sure it's hopefully better now than it was when we tried it out. But they had all kinds of issues, like even to the point that we couldn't get it to run over HTTPS. It only ran via HTTP, which for a security tool.
It's like an odd problem for a password manager, like the keeper of the keys to have,
Yeah,
right?
Right. Kevin says it isn't any better now. So, I mean, that's something that, I think a lot of times people tend to trust vendors and salespeople, which that's a whole nother topic. Maybe we could discuss for an hour on how not to trust salespeople. But, you need to be careful what you're using for security tools like that, and recognize that maybe the idea would be to make things better, but sometimes you can make it worse as well, right?
Mm.
I'd forgotten about, Mike mentioned in chat that there was a cross-site scripting in that as well. I'd forgotten that.
Yes.
So what about, keeping on this theme, what about where the data is stored? What do you think about these like online providers? LastPass is a great example, where they're storing the data online, where they have access potentially to your passwords, or do they?
Slight pause as we all think about
Anybody?
Sorry, I was doing something.
Come on, Kate.
Sorry.
Yeah, we're trying to read and talk at the same time, not working well. So do they have access? All right, well, so I think that's a completely different question about your cloud-based solutions, right? You're giving a level of trust to someone, no matter what you do, that they don't have access to it, right? So if you feel they're reputable, go ahead and use them. They have benefits. I mean, I talked to somebody who refused to use LastPass because it was in the cloud. He wanted to have it on his device. The problem is, then I need my device, whatever it is, to give me all my passwords, and I'm going to have to type them out, right? So we get back into, I just made a 30-character password that's random digits and numbers, and my phone cuts out after 30 seconds, right? You potentially get less secure passwords again because it's not there.
Now, if the implementation is done what I would consider correctly, then they should not have direct access to your passwords, because everything should be locked in basically a vault that is encrypted, and your master password is the one way to decrypt that vault. So they would be storing an encrypted version of the data that they're sending back to you. That does make it, like, there are some challenges around that for the vendors on making that work properly, because you need like recovery options, for example. I'm locked out of my account. How do you get me back in? That sort of problem. So,
or for the business, hey, so and so is not here anymore. We need to get into his password vault. How do we do that?
Yeah, exactly.
Yeah. I think I keep coming back to LastPass just because it's one I've looked at the most. But when you look at one of the fears that I've heard people express is that their model, their diagram of how they encrypt your vault locally and then send it up and store. They only have access to an encrypted version. That's designed well, but in reality, they control the code that does that encryption. So if they push down an update, or if somebody compromised their servers that controlled that code, potentially they could also send themselves an unencrypted version or send it somewhere else. What do you think about that? Is that possible, or is that something to really be concerned about?
Well, I think that I don't think this is something that a company like LastPass would do intentionally. That'd be kind of bad for business, right?
Unless the NSA said, "Here you go. Here's a national security letter."
Yeah, but you're right. The possibility of that happening is definitely there. I mean, it's technically possible to do that, for them to do that. And in addition, in most of those cases, those password managers are not open source either. So we don't have a situation where there's, the world can basically look at their code and make sure that they're doing it right and that they didn't introduce that type of a problem or vulnerability in there. And you have to remember is that it is, in each of those cases, they have a component of their code that is running on the client side. And we're always, I do a lot of testing around web apps and mobile apps, and there, you always have to be careful about having any sort of security logic on the client side. It's inherently problematic, and there's often holes in it. So, I think that's the case here.
Yeah, Mike made a good point about in chat here about browser extensions are at least reviewed by Google for Chrome. So that's something. That doesn't mean it's perfect, but
it's better than nothing.
Yeah, right. If I remember correctly, at least the way LastPass does it, and I think one other similar vendor, the actual code that does the encryption is in JavaScript. So, yes. And that can be pushed down and updated from their server. So that could still maybe pass a code review, from a third party like Google, but then still be updated later. Yeah. Eric, I see.
I'm trying to. Sorry, go ahead.
No. Soft Touch has a question there about. Do you guys think the argument carries any water that associating your password management solution with Active Directory removes an additional layer of abstraction? What do you think about that?
So I'm trying to figure out which portion we're talking about the abstraction there, right? So what I've seen in many situations are you have your password management solution and it requires your Active Directory account to get into it, right? So therefore, what layer of abstraction do you really have between the two? It should be untrusted. It should be a separate environment, regardless of whatever it is, right? So if you set up CyberArk and you need AD to get into it, you don't have any abstraction, right? So whether you choose that or you choose PAM or you choose something else, it needs to be separate, right? So I don't know if that answers your question or not as to what you're asking for there, but hopefully it does. And honestly, the worst thing you can do is have it be 100% having it require Active Directory, because if you get compromised to the point that we're being malicious and not just getting information, you crash your directory, you're never going to be able to get into cyber to get it back.
I don't know if that ringing's coming through.
Who's this? It's not me.
That's beautiful. I've got a phone call in a tab somewhere and I can't find the tab. There it is. I put my phone on mute, but not my Gmail. Beautiful. All right. Well, let's move on. Where do we go from there? Any other comments on password managers? Let's say for home use, right? For your mom, your grandma, your wife. What do you guys recommend? Do you have one you prefer?
LastPass free now works on mobile, which is something that one of my friends thought you had to pay for the mobile syncing and stuff like that. Now it's free. So I would suggest that. I think someone in the channel suggested KeyPass, but I haven't used it before.
I use KeyPass. I've used KeyPass forever and love it.
I thought KeyPass was a local though, isn't it? Or do they have a?
It is local only. You have to sync up some other way. So I store mine in Google Drive, and so it syncs across my docs, and I'm able to access it there. And then I use two-factor auth. I've got a password and then also a key file, and I sync the key file manually outside of Drive. So,
but your question was for family members.
Yeah.
So let's go to the non-tech savvy, someone who's not going to want to set up syncing and local. So looking at that,
Actually, you should say, so you don't have to set up the syncing and make it.
Yes.
work.
For them, yeah.
You didn't put it the right way.
Yeah. If we step back for a second and say, well, which one's the best? I think using any of them is better than not using any of them. From that standpoint, the one that has use one that has a user-friendly interface. I think that's really what it comes down to. So LastPass, Dashlane, I know Mike mentioned Spider Oak solution on there too on the Slack channel. I think any along those lines, those top consumer products are probably good for that. It's in this day and age, having any of them that support integration with your mobile device is key as well, because most people are going to be trying to log into things on their phone, not just on a PC. So,
But I do have a question for you then, Nathan, right? So you're not trusting the client portion of LastPass or those other base systems, because once again, you're taking your KeyPass file and putting it into the cloud. Admitted it's a file-based cloud system, but you're still doing the same thing. What's the difference in your mind between the two?
So the main difference for me is I've been using KeyPass for 7 or 8 years, or longer, 10 years maybe.
Yeah, getting all those out, that could be hard, moving into a different system.
But the other thing, and the reason that I started using it, and I think the reason it's still really popular, is that unless I manually update the program, nobody else controls the algorithm and the code that's used, right? So it's open source. It's entirely possible that people have malicious stuff in there. But I don't have to worry about, like I said, if, not that I worry about the NSA that much, but if the NSA went to LastPass and said, here's a national security letter, we want all the passwords for Nathan Sweaney, LastPass could totally push down updates to, the LastPass browser extension or my app or whatever that would then pass those passwords along. Or a bad guy. LastPass has been compromised. Big companies get compromised. So there's always the potential for that happening. But honestly, for me, the bigger issue is just all my passwords are still in the other one. So let's move on here a little bit. We talked about cracking a little bit earlier. Jason mentioned we have a cracking server we built. It's 3 years old, and I think we spent about $3.5 to $4 grand on it at the time. So, not really super expensive, kind of a commodity thing. At what point is it, at what point is a password too long to crack? Is there something where you're like, you know what, I'm not even going to worry about that hash because it's a waste of time?
Well, all right. So are you, if you're talking like us as pen testers, if I see it more than 8 characters, I'm not going to waste the time because it's going to take me several days. And at that point, I should have another method, right? Hopefully I'm not waiting for that password to get there. If you're talking about somebody else who managed to get this and they don't have any sort of time limit, wow. Let's see, it goes from like 16 hours to a couple days. I'd say if it's going to take me more than a week, I wouldn't be wasting my time on it unless I know it's something that's not going to change. I managed to get that, administrator account password or something strange like that. There's too many other ways to get the same type of information.
But I would also say that the length isn't really the only thing, because I would say that one of the key inputs that we use in a password cracker is a good dictionary list, right? That we pass in here's a list of common things, and here, do some mutations on these and try all of those against the hash. So I think as people start using more and more pasphrases, we will probably start seeing common passphrases being used. I love my kids or something like that. I'm just guessing. That's probably.
We're gonna put I love cats in there. That's gonna be the first one.
I love my cats. I love my dog. That sort of thing. There's probably going to be a set of fairly common passphrases that will evolve over time, and that they could be longer passwords then, but they'll also be on a dictionary list. So
right, I was talking about brute force.
But for brute force, yeah, I'd agree. I think that for a pen test, we usually don't go past 8 just because we run out of time, and then
and there's too many other ways.
If I had not all the time in the world, but let's say I was doing something over months, then maybe 9 or 10. But beyond that, it's too long to brute force.
Yeah. So I looked up a while back. I had done some math on ours. On our server, to brute force every possibility of an 8-character NTLM hash takes about 23 hours. A 9-character, and this is in reference to Larry asked if there's a solid hours to crack versus password length formula. So that $4,000 server 3 years ago could crack a 9-character password in a maximum of 3 months, and a 10-character password would take 23 years. So that jump from 9 to 10 is a substantial jump. Even if the GPUs are 5 times better now than they were 3 years ago, it's still going to take several years to crack a 10-character password, whereas a 9-character can be done in a period of months.
Yeah.
Now we're just talking NTLM there too. So it kind of depends on what your hashing out is.
We haven't really talked at all about that, have we? Like what algorithms being used to store the password, because that makes a huge difference for crackability.
Let's jump in there and talk about that. What is the best way? So you're building a system. What's the best way to store those passwords?
Well, there are future-proof algorithms. So if you look at PBKDF2 or bcrypt, those are probably the 2 top examples out there. They both they're inherently slow hashes to begin with, which for a password, you want a slow hash. If you're just doing message digesting for some other non-password purpose, usually you want a faster one. But for password hashing, those would be the 2 best. And by the way, Microsoft doesn't use them. And they also include a number of iterations. So not only is it slow, but you can make it slower over time. So you're storing it with, 10 iterations this year, and then Moore's law, of course, the doubling of our computing capacity over time. You'd be able to, in a couple of years, bump that up. So now it's doing 12 iterations or 14 iterations or however many you need to keep it slow. And that way, if somebody gets a hold of those hashes and they start cracking them, it's going to take them that much longer to actually generate even one hash to be able to check it. Did I explain that right?
That sounds good to me.
Somebody mentioned, I don't know if it was you, Jason, that mentioned that Windows doesn't use that. I never can remember. Peanut butter and something or other DF2.
PDK-DF2.
So, I mean, are we going to get there? Like, is Windows going to change, you think? Will they get to the point where they're using something more, I guess maybe, Eric, this might be a question for you. Is Windows going to update their authentication? Or are they going to continue to use the NTLM stuff they've been using for forever? I don't know what just happened here.
I think their thing just crashed.
We've got two Erics and we lost a Jason. Are you with us, Eric?
All right, can you hear me?
We can hear you.
We can.
Wait, I can't hear you.
Can you hear us now?
All right, there we go. We're back. Jason lost power. Sorry. So we're back now.
Without warning, my battery just died.
We were talking about Microsoft and will they ever use them, right? That was the question.
Yeah, I pointed out I was being critical of Microsoft and then Windows crashed, right?
Yeah, no, the laptop just died. It didn't crash. So
This was a power outage.
Yes. So I think you'll see them change eventually, but it's going to be a long time, right? Microsoft has always held to support to the oldest platform possible, right? It was just with the 2008 R2 admitted that was what, like 8 years ago now? I don't know.
2008,
no, 2010. So yeah, 8 years ago. They finally started getting rid of some of the older methods, right? So it's happening. It's just slow because they want to keep support for all of their older products. And I think you're also going to see, as Microsoft pushes more people to Azure AD into the cloud, I think you're going to see it shift faster at that point.
I got you. My concern, and I don't know if this is going to happen or not, but my concern is that Microsoft is going to try to push the Azure authentication and use that as basically a bolt-on control to the existing stuff and never want to upgrade it. Which, like you mentioned before, I think we don't crack passwords on engagements as often as we do like pass the hash or SMB relay or something like that, because it's the authentication protocol that's messed up, not just the hash they use. Right,
and I'm gonna go back and say part of that is on Microsoft, and that's also partially on clients, right? Not necessarily setting up everything to use the main method of authentication for Microsoft, which is Kerberos, which is actually a lot better and more secure, right? So we force people to drop into a less secure method, and that's why we can do all these wonderful things in the background. But honestly, I do think you're going to see them pushing more and more to the cloud than making major changes to the on-prem authentication. I mean, it's remained essentially the same for a very long time.
I get it. D-Law is asking here, does Microsoft still have the 16-character limit on Office 365? I'm not sure on that. Does anybody know?
I'm pretty sure that's a maximum, yeah.
Yeah, I think it is. But I don't want to say 100%. It's been a while since I looked.
Okay. All right, well, let's we're getting close to the end of our time. Let's talk just for a minute about some two-factor auth stuff. So, we all know traditionally what two-factor auth is. If not, you can go Google that. But, the idea of something you have, something you know, something you are. What about some of the different types of techniques? Like, for instance, SMS has been in the news recently. Do you guys still trust SMS? Kate, what do you think? Would you trust something like Duo or an SMS solution for authentication?
Would I trust Duo? Yeah, totally. SMS, I don't know. I guess if it can't do anything, I'd rather have SMS. But if I had a choice between SMS and another app, I would definitely utilize another app.
Why is that?
I actually don't know why that is. What security do you have in texting besides Signal, which it's not using? So if it's not encrypted, I don't really like it.
I hear you.
I don't know about you guys.
Does anybody else have an opinion on that? I know I've seen articles that, SMS has been abused. There was a lot of, there was a big thing several months ago, I think, maybe a year ago now. A bunch of Bitcoin, folks had their Bitcoin stolen because of SMS, some type of attack. The folks were using SMS as their two-factor auth, and that was able to be attacked and bypassed.
Yeah.
That's something Mike just mentioned, was that you can see SMS from a locked phone, which is not cool.
Yeah, you can modify that, but
there are
but a lot of people haven't.
you could say the same of other apps too. I mean, any app that pushes to the
phone.
front page of the phone could be a problem with that one. But SMS does have that issue of it's not encrypted. There's not really any way to encrypt it. It never will be. But that being said, I would rather use SMS as a second factor of authentication than not having a second factor of authentication. That it's still it's an out of band. It's not the same device or same technology that you're trying to log in with, right? It's outside of that. It makes sense.
Hey, Jason, can you lean forward a little bit when you talk? You're kind of quiet. I think it's just because you're further away from the mic.
Yeah, the mic's different than it was before.
Yeah, we stopped using the podcast mic, and now we're just using my poor laptop built-in mic. So we'll try and get a little closer, like we like each other.
I just posted in Slack a webcam on Shodan that shows an RSA secure ID token. I'm curious what you guys think about that, and I don't want to tell you what I think yet. I want to see what you guys think.
Well, here's the thing: unless you know what it logs into, what value does it really have?
Yeah. Kevin says he sees no issue. So here's the thing. If I'm going after that IP address or somebody at that IP address, and I find this webcam and see that, I have a lot more likely chance of figuring out. Now, it depends on how big of an organization it is. It depends on how many people are behind it. For us, we see it as not that big a deal. But for somebody targeting that IP, now maybe it's a little bit more of a bad deal.
Well, and that's assuming though that's the same IP where the systems are that you would log into. So that would be a piece of information that gives you a hint as to where it is. But let's say that's somebody's home. It's at their house. At that point, it's maybe completely disassociated, except, well, maybe with some additional recon, you can put that 2 and 2 together and figure it out. But I don't know.
Yeah, it's hard to say. I mean, I struggle with it. Somebody pointed out the other day on Twitter that any Slack channel you join, and I'm saying this reluctantly because I know a bunch of people just joined our Slack. If it's a paid Slack team, not this, the one we're using is free, but if it's a paid Slack team, the owners can actually go in and look at the authentication logs and see the IP address of everybody that's connected. So on Twitter, it was put in from the perspective of, if you're on site with a client, any professional Slack teams you join, people can keep track of where you're at. So for something like that, like if you're targeting a specific person and you had access to that, maybe there's different ways of, doing the reconnaissance you talked about.
Yeah.
Or just always VPN back home.
That's true. Yeah. I mean, that's where I was going to say is, I don't think there's anything necessarily bad about it, but I think there's a lot of potentially bad things that could be done. So, all right, we're coming up towards the end. Two last questions, but one, we've talked a lot about different things that can be done. We've kind of hinted at, it's okay to ease up on password restrictions if you put some other controls in place. I just kind of wanted to go around. What are some specific controls that you guys think that, hey, I'm a business owner, or, I'm an IT guy. What controls could I put in place to be able to say, yeah, we'll ease up on the password restrictions, maybe not require changes as often or not require as much complexity, but instead we're going to do these things. What are those things?
So,
I'll let
well,
Eric speak to that.
we already, I think we covered one, right? Which is for your sensitive accounts, not necessarily your normal user accounts, but your sensitive accounts, multi-factor all the way, please turn it on. You know, and also try and get through the idea of, you know, a sentence to people, right? Hey, if you can somehow come up with a phrase or something that is longer than this, we'll put you in a different group, which you can do with Windows now, right? Or almost any solution probably. And we'll put you somewhere else where your password does not expire as often because it's going to be this long, right? And it has MFA on it. So why force you to make it change so often?
I think you hit something pretty good though with having a separate account. There's still a lot of companies that don't have separate accounts for their administrative access or.
I don't want to talk about that. I don't want to, yeah.
I was going to add having account lockout as well. I think is a control. If you don't already have that in place, you need to have it. You know, that makes a big difference because not just on your Windows login, but let's say it's for a website or something like that.
Yeah.
You know, having that in there, it slows down the attacks significantly. Anything you have in place actually to slow down an attacker is important. That combined with logging of those security events
Absolutely
together, right?
And
It makes a big difference.
not just unsuccessful logins. As much as everyone hates to see them, those successful logins are just as important, right? I know they fill up everybody's logs really fast, but sometimes knowing that bad login, right? That login from a bad place is much more intuitive than finding those failed logins.
Yeah, seeing
I
that.
think it's also, sorry.
No, I was going to follow up with Eric just saying, seeing 500 failed logins isn't as bad as seeing 500 failed logins followed by one successful one.
Right.
I was going to go with user behavior analytics tools, which will say, you know, these people normally log into these 5 servers, but then they, you know, this person logged into this other one over here. Is that normal for them? No, it's not. Maybe you should flag on that based off of what, you know, what a team usually has access to or something else. Just because they have access to it doesn't necessarily mean that they normally do it. And it could still be an attacker or something utilizing their credentials.
And I was going to say, I was thinking about, you know, definitely the local network and things, but for web apps, I mean, if you do hold sensitive data, right, having multi-factor nowadays, I think it's getting easier to put that into your systems, right? It's not, you don't have to necessarily come up with a homegrown solution every time. It's definitely probably worth investing the time and effort to looking at some of those solutions and putting them in there, right?
But I think one of the biggest challenges there, though, is doing it across the board, right? Because it doesn't help you to have multi-factor authentication or 2FA for one type of login, but then not have it for another login that's actually the same account.
So, okay.
Like let's say you need it to log into your desktop,
Right.
But then you don't need it to log into I don't know, an RDP session or something like that. Like,
Fair enough.
So it has to be implemented universally to actually be fully effective.
Right. Mike added a few things in here. I think kind of summarizing what we've said: multi-factor auth, password phrases or sentences, separate admin accounts, account lockout rules, and logging of security events, both successful and unsuccessful. And then I think what Kate said, and I don't see it very much in the enterprise yet, but active monitoring of what would you call that? Maybe heuristic stuff, behavioral events, what's expected. What's
User
normal.
behavioral analytics is usually baselining
Yeah.
risk levels. Yeah.
I think there's a lot of potential there in the future. So, well, it's 1 o'clock. I want to go ahead and honor everybody's time. But one last question as we go around. We'll start with Kate and then Jason and then Eric. What's your favorite password?
I'm not going to share that.
I mean, like, me or for that I found. I mean, those are.
Nobody's gonna bite. Jason's got one.
Yeah, right now, spring 2018.
Yeah, sure. You beat me to it.
I was going to go with, no, I won't say that.
Yeah, I probably can't share my favorites either. I will say anybody that's listening in business, please recognize that at least the pen testers, if not the actual attackers, will crack your passwords or grab them as they're passing by somewhere. And we will see them. So don't put something that you'd be embarrassed to have your mom know about.
Or that you don't accidentally type into another, person via chat. Because that's happened to me before. My boss once told me his old password. He's like changing it now.
All right. Well, that brings us to the end of the hour. I appreciate everybody's time. We will be doing our next one on April 24th. I'm not sure what the topic is yet. We've got a couple lists of ideas. If you have an idea that you'd love us to chat about, throw it up in chat in the Slack, and we'll take that into consideration. But otherwise, we'll see everybody in April. And feel free to stay in that professionally evil Slack team. Most of us hang out there pretty much all the time, so we'd love to facilitate some more conversations. So thanks, everybody.
Bye, y'all.